Hey guys, it's Thomas here, and we are on episode 9 of the Marineland Monterey Mega Build series. On the last episode, we decorated the tank. It was epic. It was fun. It is now gorgeous in there. The fish shall be uber comfortable, feeling like they are in their natural environment. And on this episode, we got to tie up some loose ends before we get those fish in there. And that's going to include getting the media in the sump. We've also got to get some temperature control on this tank so that the temperature is perfect for them. And then I'm going to show you some upgrades that I actually did that I hadn't planned at the beginning. And I think we're going to start off with sump media. All right, here we go. I'm going to go grab that now. All right, guys, if you haven't seen it, on the 7th episode, I talked about what media I'm going to be using in the sump and why. And today I'm going to be starting off with the Marine Pure Biomedia. I'm going to be taking the thinner panels and lining the bottom of the first chamber of the sump. That way, all of that aerated water that's just come through the overflow system that has more oxygen gets to that media first. It should have some great aerobic bacteria growth, so I should get some nitrification through this media without issue there. And then I'm going to be putting the bigger, beefier block in the lower flow section of the sump where I'm not going to be having as much flow. I'm going to be putting the denitrate in there as well, but I thought I would try one of these panels out in there just to see what happens. I can always move it to the first section of the sump if I find I'm not getting the results I'm looking for. But that's where I'm going to start with it. If you look carefully here, this just went in, and this media is so porous and water travels through it so easily that it's actually wicked this small amount of water in the sump up a little bit more than halfway through the block, which is pretty impressive. So I know that the water is going to travel through this very easily. All right, so up next we've got Seachem Matrix and Denitrate. I'm going to take the Matrix, drop it into a big mesh bag. It's going to have open pores on it, so the water flows through no problem. Shouldn't trap much at all in the way of debris. The bag's just there to keep the Matrix kind of together and in one spot. I'm going to stick that in the first section of the sump right on top of the Marine Pure Biomedia. And then I'm going to take the Denitrate, put it in a finer mesh bag, actually a pair of them. Get inside the little bag where you'll be much more useful. I'm going to drop that into the lower flow section or the refugium section of the sump. And I'm going to keep the flow in that section a little bit slower to help foster a little bit of that anaerobic bacteria. And the mesh bag will further help slow down the flow getting to the media. So hopefully we get some denitrification going on. Now I'm sure you remember I also picked up some ChemiPure Elite, but being a chemical media and having absolutely no livestock in here, there's no reason for me to put this in yet. It also has a phosphate remover. There's no phosphates in the water until I get fish and food in there. So this I'm not going to put in the sump right away, but I'll tell you where I am going to put it. I am going to end up putting it in the same section that the media cartridges sit in the sump. I'll be pulling those media cartridges out while this is in there, and I will fill those media cartridges with specialty media like a carbon or anything else really that I might require in the future, and I will swap them as needed. So let's say I end up with a lot of tannins from the driftwood and I do want to take them out. I'll take this out temporarily, put it back in the container, and run straight carbon as not to waste the ChemiPure Elite and rather just take that stuff out with the carbon. But, like I said, not going in yet, saving it for later. And I'm sure you guys remember, I have filter socks. Mind you, I swapped the Red Sea socks out with the ones that came with the sump way back on episode 7 when I talked about them. Reason being, I needed them in there to check the flow properties of the media when I wet tested the aquarium. So I'm just going to hold on to these. If the Carib Sea substrate ends up having a lot of dust, which I'm not anticipating because they pre-rinse everything and I have the biomagnet clarifier there, these will pull out anything that is floating in the water. So I will stash them for now and pull them out on an occasion when they are required. Now for temperature control. I've picked up a pair of 250 watt Eheim Jaeger heaters. I've used them for years and years. They're super reliable and you can recalibrate them if the mechanical thermostat seems to go out of whack at all, which I really like about them because as much as heaters are accurate, they are only so accurate. So being able to recalibrate them essentially helps you make up for the wear-in that you get with any mechanical thermostat. And heaters alone will not do the trick. You will also want a thermometer, which is what I've got right here. I went with a Tom thermometer. I like it. It's got a temp alert on it, so I can set it to a specific temperature if it goes above or below, it'll beep, let me know, and I can run to the aquarium and make sure everything's okay. It'll also give me a reference just so I know roughly where the temperature is, make sure that the heaters are properly calibrated. Otherwise, what am I calibrating them to, right? I need a reference. That's my reference. So I'm going to be throwing the thermometer on the sump. That way I don't have it hanging around anywhere on the aquarium. If I ever need to check the temperature, I can just swing the door open, have a peek, and close it and not have to see it ever again. Now, the heaters, you'd think I would want to put them in the sump, but here's the thing. Just like with the FX6, which is a backup filter, I can't have them in the overflow system because if it ever shuts off, then I'm not heating the tank anymore. So I'm actually going to have at least one of these two heaters sitting behind one of the rock panels that's covering the overflow. It'll go right up against the glass. I made sure I had just enough space for them. That way one is always in the tank in case there's an issue with the sump system. I have a heater still heating that aquarium. The second one I will put in one of the overflows because it's too tall to fit in the sump no matter how I try to stick it in there. But it's perfect for the overflows. I'll stick it in there. It'll basically act like a kind of like a heater module or compartment. So all the water rushing through that overflow system gets heated, goes down to the sump and back up. It's a great way to make sure that the overall temperature in the aquarium's essentially going to hit the point I want it to because water is always moving past the heater. The heater can't just heat up a small stagnant pool of water and kind of keep that, you know, warm and everything else around it suffers, which is a big reason why people like to stagger their heaters in their aquarium. They'll have them kind of in the third mark, like 1/3 of the tanks marked off with one heater, the other third's marked off with the other heater. That way everything around the heaters is kind of the same temp. If you have it all the way on one side of the aquarium and not near any flow, sometimes you get a warm spot near the heater. The other end of the tank could even be a few degrees colder, and we don't want that. So that's what I'm going to do, and now I'm going to do it. So I'm going to set them to about 76, 77, which is pretty comfortable for most tropical fish. I'm also going to make sure that the pilot light on the heater is facing outwards so that I can check that it's on even with it kind of hidden behind everything. Then I'm just going to stick it to the glass. I'm doing roughly the same thing with this side, except for we're going to be going down the overflow panel this side. Now, I also mentioned before that I had to relocate the intake and the output of the FX6. And what I've done is flipped the FX6 in the cabinet below, turned it around so that the intake side was on the right so I could sneak it just in here behind the overflow facade. And then I just clipped the output right where you're seeing it there. So it's going to be pushing the flow out into the tank now. The intake is hidden, so I don't have to see it. And although I can see this at the moment, I did have a conversation with Boyan at Aqua Decor, and he essentially told me that they can make a wood facade, so it would look like essentially a piece of driftwood branching out that would cover this outlet so that it would still be jetting water out, but instead of it looking like a black outlet, it would look like wood, which I think would be a lot better since this is technically visible, so I may add that in the future. So now I've got the media down in the sump. I've also got my temperature control in, that's both heaters, as well as the thermometer, so I can reference what the actual temperature is. And now I'm going to show you some upgrades that I made to the system, starting with up top, the lighting. So now I actually have a second Orbit IC light up there, and I've mounted both of those lights to the top of the canopy. So first off, it was okay for me to mount them up there because I flipped the legs around, which gives me about a 3/4 inch lift from the top of the canopy down to where the lights are, especially because I used little hooks to suspend them. So they shouldn't overheat, and they are opposite sides of a channel that runs down the top of the canopy that's going to allow any warm air to escape. So they're not going to kind of choke themselves out with heat there. The reason I added a second fixture is because in order to essentially get the color temperature that I wanted in the aquarium, which is a little bit on the warmer side, given that it's going to be freshwater, I really had to turn the blues down quite a bit. And with these fixtures, the blues essentially make up at least half of the LEDs in the fixture. So with them turned down to about 30%, which is where they're at, even with the whites at 100 and the RGBs tuned in to give me the temperature I want, it wasn't quite as bright as I'd like, so I've thrown another fixture up there and now it's perfect. And I have one more upgrade to show you, but that one's down below in the stand, and that is the pump. So I did mention last time that the pump was perfect for running the system. Essentially, it gave me the exact flow that I needed to make sure the system was running effectively. But what I had planned for was to get a slightly larger pump so that I'd be able to add another, media reactor under there if I wanted to, or tee off from it and attach it to whatever, UV sterilizer. Who knows what I'm going to stick down there in the future. So I wasn't able to do that given the fact that I was pushing that pump at full capacity. It was running the system just where I wanted it. So I went and grabbed the 3170 DC pump from Current USA, and that's going to have a lot more kick. So I haven't tested it yet because I haven't filled the tank up since, but I can obviously get the system running where I need it, and then I'm going to have a lot of extra room for adding anything in the future. Now it's time to get some water in this tank, get everything circulating. And I've gotten a lot of questions from you guys regarding how I'm going to fill this tank, given that the driftwood has not been pre-soaked and has no weight on it. So essentially, it's buoyant, it's going to want to float. And I have a method that I don't always use, but with a tank like this one and how I've got things set up right now, I'm going to employ, and that's a slow fill. So what I'm going to do is add 2 to 3 inches of water every couple of days, and that's going to give the driftwood a chance to absorb the water at each level as I fill it so that it doesn't just kick up and float away, and that way I don't have to go and get any natural stone or heavy weights to weigh the wood down. You've also actually inquired about how the faux stone is going to fill up with water, and they don't have holes in the top, so there's nowhere for air to escape. So what I'm going to do is once they hit that pinnacle point where any trapped air is going to cause them to float, I'm just going to tip them over, allow the air to come out and flip them back. And that's not going to be an issue. It's not hard to do at all. Even with the wood there, it's not going to be a big deal. As far as tanning goes, there's not a ton of wood given the water volume. So I've got more than 265 gallons of water, including what's going to be in the sump and the FX6 filter underneath the tank. So whatever tannin I do get, if it's too much visually for my liking, because it's not going to bother any of the inhabitants that I plan to put in here, I'll just use a bit of carbon to pull it out. So that's no big deal either. So that's the long and short of it. Next time you see this tank, hopefully it's going to be full of water and the driftwood won't be floating at the surface. And if it is, then it's going to float around until it sinks, and then we'll go from there. I got the first few inches of water in the tank. Next time you see it though, it's going to be completely full. I'll have the circulation running, I'll have the heaters on, the water's going to have water conditioner in it, and it will be like a wonderful warm quilt of love to wrap around those fish that we're gonna put in there on episode 10, which is so close. I've been waiting for this for what feels like forever. It's been about 3 months, and I've been dying to get fish in this tank. We're finally gonna be able to do that. So I'm gonna take you guys to the store with me. We're gonna look at some fish. I'll pick some out. We'll bring them back and we'll get them into this paradise I've built for them. It's gonna be a lot of fun. You're not gonna wanna miss it. But if you have any questions regarding what you saw in this episode, feel free to drop that down in the comment section below or reach out to us on social media like Facebook or Twitter. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. We're almost at the end. It's gonna be crazy awesome. I'm really excited for it. And we'll do updates too. So being subscribed, I think, is paramount to your happiness and my happiness and everyone's happiness. And we're going to continue to tank as one big family. We'll tank on into the future of aquarium keeping with this tank and all the tanks, and it's going to be great. I'm just over the moon right now. I just can't wait to put fish in. Can you believe it?